Hey everybody, KC here. So, like a lot of people over the years, one of the things you would do all the time is, you go to the mailbox and you look for the magazines for which you had subscribed. And I have to say, I've always loved magazines. So we always had tons of them. Everything from, the Time and Newsweek and the New Yorker and, Men's Health and Women's Health and Prevention. And oh my God, I can't even tell you how many magazine subscriptions we've had over the years. But again, over the years, as we had more access to things online, we've winnowed down that number. And frankly, we don't get very much mail at all these days. A couple of junk things normally. And the last magazine subscription we had was to the New Yorker. Well, I finally pulled the trigger on something I've been meaning to do for some time. I called up the New Yorker and said, listen, I really don't need the paper subscription anymore. I just like to get it digitally. Ends up I pay about half or less than I've been paying for the paper edition, and that was no problem. And it's done. So in fact, I got rid of the last magazine subscription that I had. Now, that's not to say I'm going to read the New Yorker less. In fact, I read the New Yorker more because one of the things the New Yorker has done is reinvent themselves for the digital age. It's not just however many stories will come out in the paper edition every week. They're constantly generating new content. And in a lot of ways, I think the content is more interesting and more relevant than it was 15, 20, 25 years ago. No, you don't get 20,000 word columns about wheat, which is some of the kind of thing the New Yorker used to do. The stuff's a lot more interesting. And I still read The Atlantic online. The Atlantic is wonderful. Again, a really good example of a magazine reinventing itself for the digital age. It is an example of how things have changed. It doesn't mean that magazines don't exist anymore. It just means that they have to figure out how to reinvent themselves for a new generation of readers. Listen, we still get one paper thing in on a regular basis, and that's the New York Times. And that's only because Mrs. Content Guy likes reading it on paper. I read the New York Times as much or more than she does, but I'm reading it online. It is, again, and it's not a new lesson, but it's a lesson worth repeating for every retailer, every marketer, that just because sales shift doesn't mean you're not in the same business. It just means you're communicating with customers differently and you're satisfying their needs in a different kind of way. It's an incredibly important thing to do. You resist that tide at your own peril because the world moves on. Anyway, I think I'm going to go in, read my last paper edition of the New Yorker. That's what's on my mind. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.